Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone here today. I'd like to start the meeting, so if you would please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have everyone here today, so we certainly have our quorum. And do we have Commander Taylor here? General Manager Gruber, were you in contact with Commander Taylor?
No, not directly, but he was here last meeting when it was dismissed and continued to this time, so he was aware of the time.
Okay. All right. So we will, if he comes in, we'll find time for him. But in the meantime, we will move on then. And let's see.
Excuse me, Madam President, just so it's on the record, we did have a closed session related to real property negotiations that commenced at 3 o'clock at a special meeting, and there are no reports from that closed session.
Thank you. Okay, and so we will begin with then item 3A, and we have a request for 3, and I think I would like for you, Mr. Flores, to make your report first, and then we'll have public comment. So welcome, Mr. Dean Flores, with a presentation to our board regarding recent activity.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam President, I'm always so used to following everybody. I'm now pulling my notes together very quickly. So let me go over items that we have been working on. So I know that the manager will have a manager's report in terms of Sacramento activity. I'll touch on those for a moment, but I do want to go over about 6 items. The first is obviously, congratulations on the EIR, now out and ready for comment and ready for print. And I know that there's an October public forum on that. I look forward to also participating and being here. So I want to congratulate the board and the members for getting that completed. On that front, I should say tree mortality and first responders have been part of what we've been looking at. We've had a lot of discussion. I was very happy to come up and meet with the fire team here in Cambria, along with Director Sanders and Director Thompson, and of course the general manager. We had a very good meeting. I think the point of that meeting was to go back and try to figure out how to get funds to this particular community, number one. Number two is to how to look at the criteria that the board is currently using, especially CAL FIRE. Sometimes that criteria is based on old, outdated views, and by that meaning density of trees versus density and population. That's super important. We think the state kind of gets that now. We had a lot of discussion about that, and also about funding. So there's no doubt that there is a need for funding. OES laid out quite a bit of funding that is available today, but very little of it is being available for communities such as Cambria, where we actually have some issues where we have to work with PG&E, where we have to work with others, and we have some private property issues. And we also talked a little bit about how that issue pertains to the rights of the district itself as opposed to even the county. So we had some very good discussions. We think we had some very positive meetings in Sacramento. I'll let the general manager go over that, but I think overall, the overall issue is how do we bring more funds to this area, and I think we pretty much have a good grasp of what needs to change. One of the things that we did learn is that the governor's task force is beginning to turn the corner on grants that will be coming out. Those grants should be forthcoming, and I do know that hopefully a lot of the criteria will be more reflective of population and density. So I just want to make sure we touched on that. We had a whole bunch of meetings with not only CAL FIRE, but with the folks in Sacramento who are really interested in OES, particularly in this area. As predicted, what really brought the attention to this area was the word Hearst Castle. It really, when you say Hearst Castle, it lands up on the LA Times, and then everybody's scurrying to want to meet. We were very fortunate, not fortunate, but in some sense that fire or that discussion led to a very large meeting at OES in Sacramento. Big room. I don't think the general manager and I thought that many people would be there to talk about Cambria, but it was a very full room and a very full discussion. I also would like to mention that we continue to work on your state park issue and the entry issue. It is an outstanding issue that should be resolved and can be resolved. I think we have figured out some path to do that in a manner that's more mutual with state parks. That looks very positive. However, there's other agencies now involved we're trying to communicate with. Coastal Commission is one of those. So we're trying to figure out what Coastal Commission's thought processes are, our thought processes, and we had a very good meeting with state parks in Sacramento about how to proceed on, and I thought that was a very good discussion. I also want to mention we saw the State Resources Board, Control Board, about grants. There have been some thoughts that somehow grants were oversubscribed and filled. We were very happy to learn that that is not the case, that in fact there are still funds available, that our project is very much alive, that when you hear the word suspense, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're put into some category that somehow never gets to, or there's oversubscribed. What we found out is suspense basically means as long as we're in the category where we're at, that we're all good and fine. So we just have to continue to proceed on, and we thought we had some very positive meetings letting them know that we want to look at the wastewater issue, that we see funding available down the line, and I thought it was a very, very positive meeting with them. I should also mention the water rights issue. We have had discussions in Sacramento regarding water rights, where we're at, being a bit remiss, now trying to catch up. I think we were a little surprised to find out that the waiting list and the water rights issue in Sacramento is about 33 years in terms of things that still need to be processed. So if we think we're late, there are about 33 years worth of late projects in this category. So that was a bit of a shocker, but in some sense it says that we are not the only district late in the category of 33 years worth of backlog. So we hopefully have highlighted them a path. I think they feel very comfortable with the path, and I think we're going to proceed on that issue, probably faster than any of those 33. So that, just want to make sure the chair knew that, and the board. I would also like to comment on the Coastal Commission. Obviously, you have probably watched a lot of discussion in the LA Times about the Coastal Commission, where it's going, how it's, what's going to happen in Sacramento, and all of those bills dealing with the Coastal Commission pretty much died. They died for a lot of reasons, but my guess is bills never die in Sacramento, so expect more debate, a different type of push next year, and I kind of expect that a lot of that will center on an agreement between the Coastal Commission, the governor's office, and a few members of the legislature, including Senator Hannaford Jackson. They're very close, but it just quite couldn't get over the finish line. So I expect to give you an update on that as we move forward. The last thing I want to report on is our grant. As you know, they're holding 5% of the remaining dollars, and there was some discussion on somehow that being, now off the table because we may have missed a deadline. We're pretty clear now that we haven't missed a deadline. We simply are waiting for the county and the state to get a few more pieces of information from this board. But I think they're pretty much aware of the fact that it's forthcoming. So I don't think we've lost any money. I don't think that somehow we have to give back any of the dollars. We think we're pretty clear that we just have to finish a few of the items, and I think we're pretty much going to be in good shape. I think that's basically it for the report. We'll be here to answer any questions, and the next report I give obviously will be the quarterly report, and then we'll do more of a PowerPoint presentation on that.
Very good, thank you. Do we have any questions, Director Rice?
Thank you for being here today and for the more full report. I appreciate that. When you're talking about the funds for the tree removals or for the tree mortality, are we talking about money to help homeowners or money to help with the properties the CCSD owns or that are publicly owned? Or can you kind of just elaborate?
Yeah, there are three categories. Let's start with publicly owned. Those are funds that currently come out of what this area actually puts in. The commission, or I should say the task force, is trying to figure out how to get one-to-one back. And I don't think they are quite done with that yet. However, I do know grants will start in that arena. So the board and this agency should be available for those types of trees that are on public lands that you have control over. There is another avenue that was open to the board for discussion. I know the GM was going to have talk to PG&E. PG&E has done a lot of work in other areas where their land abets private land. And in that realm, the issue is simply how to get PG&E and private folks to have a discussion on true dead trees and what to do about them. I call that a source of funding because PG&E has come out and done that work for free, at least not of charge, to the district or to the resident. That avenue still needs to be explored quite a bit, and hopefully PG&E will give us a better, clearer picture on how that's going to proceed here in Cambria. And then the third item of funding, which is now directly on private land for residents themselves to clear this, is an issue that didn't get resolved. So there was $140 million of greenhouse GGRF dollars available that the legislature in the last night could have allocated to this category that would have allowed a lot of relief for those in that group. The legislature closed the night with funding 20 million of the 140 million. So there's still 120 million still in the fund. Now you'll have people really battling over 20 million where they should really be battling over about 100 million. Not sure how that deal got struck, but just know that I think for the private folks, those were dollars that I think could have been put to really good use with CAL FIRE and OES.
Okay, because I know there's a lot of folks in town on fixed incomes that basically own their homes outright, and they don't have the extra money, the extra couple grand to take those dead trees off their property, but it's troublesome when you're talking about government funds on private property type of deal. So that's still not quite. Would be nice if we could help subsidize some of those costs.
I think that's also, Director Rice, I think that's also an issue of how much power this board has on the issues that are on the private side. And apparently, more than Sacramento and more than the county, you do have a lot more reach into that category. The problem is that you don't have the funds, even if you had the reach. So even if you wanted to do this, it would fall on the residents. So the whole issue of those greenhouse gas dollars falling into a category is really to give folks like yourselves the ability to offset those costs with the residents.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam President?
Director Behringer?
Yes, Mr. Flores, I really appreciate you keeping track on so many things. I do think that you are pretty much responsible for the population density idea, and the people that you were able to get together and drive that thought process through wasn't just because of the Hearst fire. I tend to think it was something that you had a great deal to do with, and I like the idea of, I believe that if staff, as good as they are, if they were left thinking that suspense meant cancellation and driving that up, I think it's you that can do it, and I really appreciate your work. And the water rights issue, the way that we can get Mr. Gruber in front of the right types of people. I just want to thank you for that and the consistent view toward that project.
Yeah, I thought we had some good, Director Behringer, I thought we had some very good discussions on the water rights thing. It was somewhat shocking for us. You kind of figure the only person in town, and then you find out there's 33 years worth of folks that in some cases don't even know whether they're in that category or not. So it's no slight against the state. I think they are simply undermanned and underfunded. But I thought they were very good. They had told General Manager Gruber to keep them informed every step of the way, and that as soon as we kind of get some wind behind the sails, that would be pretty much of a positive thing. So that was a pretty solid, good meeting I thought we had. Okay.
Any other comments from the board? Did you have anything? Okay, I know. Well, I just wanted to thank you too. I think what you're doing and where we are with current risks with the forest and forest management is really a very big help to us. When we're talking about the population, and in your report you mentioned that you know, the devices they've been using to allocate so far funding and grants have had to do with the Sierras more than us. And hopefully, you know, when I read some of this, do you have any sense of a timeline when they'll really look at population versus just acreage of trees?
My guess is that there will probably need to be legislation next year because they have one tool. It's a strong tool. It's this aerial survey data, which kind of drives the entire process. And that's the one tool. And I think the issue is simply, how do you take the aerial survey and yet go a little deeper beyond, you know, this true pun of, you know, you lose the forest for the trees, well, you lose the population somehow in the forest. And I think the issue simply is, how do you create a ratio of assets plus people that allows for funding such as this area, so you don't get lost in just whatever's brown, and in some cases, first out, you know, in terms of funding. So I think Sacramento learned a lot about other communities. I think the fire here, in my opinion only, was, and as tragic as it was and as strong as it was late in the process. If this had happened 4 months prior, then I think there would have been a lot. I mean, just kind of happened right at the legislative end of the close of what they were trying to figure out. I think they, with the rest of the $120 million, there needs to be that criteria for other communities. So I think there's a way that the legislature will probably pinpoint that, is my guess. But it was clearly, you couldn't get anyone on anybody's radar screen until Hearst Castle ended up in the LA Times, and then, you know, Jerry and I walk into a meeting and there's like 14 people there or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of people there all trying to wonder what we can do to make this a more a positive process. So I think overall it just says that we, going into the January, there probably should lead the effort in terms of a new ratio, or at least a category. It makes some sense.
Yeah, see, and I appreciate your continuing to advocate for that, because in what we're looking at here, first the Sierras and the 1 person per 1,000 acres, finally moving to our county of 1 person to 10 acres, and actually in Cambria, it's then 25 people to 10 acres, so it's really quite a bit more. So I think we have, you know, certainly reasonable expectation as a community that population and bringing their way of assessing, you know, how do we really allocate money out. Forest, and then of course population is a very, very critical part. So I thank you for that.
You got it.
Any more comments from the board? Director Rice?
Thank you, President Robinette. Something that you said kind of sparked a thought. Does it make any difference? Would it make any difference if we brought up the fact that this is one of the very few Monterey pine forests?
Yeah.
And that it's essentially a heritage site just for the forest itself?
Yeah, and I just made a small reference to that, but, you know, there's also this category of special assets, you know, that has to be highlighted in a bigger way. I should say on that point, this would score very high. I mean, not only because of its proximity to Hearst Castle, but because of the issue you just mentioned now. Those aren't counted today. It's really an aerial that says, that looks brown, that looks really brown, that looks okay. And then the funding goes to 6 counties originally that were the high hazard counties. Just so you know, during the process, that number moved to 9 before the legislature adjourned. Had this happened 4 weeks prior, then you would probably say that San Luis Obispo County may have been in line to do that. I will say, though, however, no one from the county is standing behind me, but this county really does need to have a plan, a true plan. Your local folks had a very strong idea of a plan. I think the county wanted, you know, Supervisor Gibson's person was there saying, you know, we really need a plan like the other folks. And I would simply say that that's probably something this board should be continuing to push the county for the next season. You know, really having a true plan with funding notes in it, I think, is because that money goes to those who are ready. And if you're not ready, and I get why we're not ready, because we're not in that zone that you just mentioned, but
Do you mean an emergency plan or a
Yeah.
forest management plan?
like a little bit of a OES/forestry/ and I know they gave us an example of one, and Director Saunders was at that meeting. They gave us one of the counties, for example, very good, very strong, but they were I think they were kind of looking for someone in the group to kind of produce a similar, and I think maybe that should go back to the county, who needs to declare early and then pull people together. No slight, I just think that's something that to prepare for early dollars the next time, for sure.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And the discussion. Thank you very much. We have a request for public comment on this item. Tina Dickinson.
Good afternoon, Board. Tina Dickinson. I have been working for 3 to 4 years on the water rights issue, and with the State Water Resources Control Board asking for all kinds of information. This is what I received back in November of 2014 from Mitch Moody at State Water Resources Control Board. Tina, both permits, both in Santa Rosa and San Simeon, are past their completion of use dates, and the district has filed petitions to extend the time to complete beneficial use under these permits. They filed them in October of 2014. Until or unless these extensions are granted, the district is authorized to divert only up to the maximum use achieved during the time periods designated for completion of beneficial use under each permit. And then the permit numbers are listed. The permits the maximum use during this period, according to our records, is 217.9 acre feet for Santa Rosa, and for beneficial use, and 798 acre feet in San Simeon. The original permit diversion in San Simeon was 1,230 acre feet, and in Santa Rosa it was 518 acre feet. So we've lost 732 acre feet back since December 31st of 2005. If I can get this information several years ago, in this case I'm reading from 2 years ago, why is it that the people who are hired, who make plenty of money around here, can't get the same information? And in fact, the general manager it was reported in a quote from the Cambrian close to a couple of years ago that all of our permits are up to date. Everything's fine. No, they're not fine. And how do we expect to go forward with a water facility when we don't even have these diversion permits with the full allocation for growth? Really and truly, it is really frustrating when the people that work here do not even know, or if they knew, are not aware of this information. It is shocking that this amount of water that should be within our diversion permits has not been addressed. Now, granted, Mr. Gruber was not the general manager in 2005, but he was in 2011, and I would say, shame on whoever was directing the board at that time, back in 2005, to not be addressing this most critical issue for this town. And I just don't understand in Mr. Flores' report under number 3 why, I guess, I found out ages ago that it's going to take a long time for those time extensions to be addressed. We're just finding out from a lobbyist, basically, that that's going to take that long.
Thank you.
You may be shaking your head, Director Sanders, but believe me, it does take a long time, as you well know. And it's not
thank
just,
you.
You're not going to just get it like that.
Okay, no further requests for public comment on this item. So we are ready to move now, because we have kind of quite a modified meeting. So we will go under item 5 to public comment that will be on anything that's jurisdictional to this board, but not on the agenda today. So we will start with that on 5. Okay, let's see. There's no number on this. There is no, oh, item 5. Okay. All right, first, on item 5, we have for public comment, Sherry Bell.
Good afternoon, Sherry Bell. I wanted to, my statement, I'm going to be moving pretty fast because of my 3-minute limitation, but I wanted to talk about the surcharges and penalties related to the water conservation issue, which was on the 825 meeting, Resolution 34-2016 that the board passed. Beginning with the March-April 2014 billing cycle, due to the state drought and declared Stage 3 water emergency, this board passed a resolution to initiate surcharges to incentivize water conservation and to penalize those persons or entities that failed to comply and exceeded their maximum water use allotment. For the period March 2014 through February 2016, this resolution resulted in $770,923 in surcharges for CCSD customers that did not comply. During the same period, the CCSD made adjustments of $226,605. It's not clear to me what effect the adjustments had on the surcharges. If adjustments were not made, would the amount of surcharges have been $997,528,000? Or was the $226,605 adjustment deducted from the surcharging charges, leaving us with a collection of $544,318? The board then decided to suspend surcharges effective March 1, 2016 through August 31, 2016. The meeting on August 25 was to discuss and consider extending the suspension. At that meeting, I asked for a percentage breakdown of the surcharges between residences and businesses. During the board discussion, several directors stated their belief that primarily residential customers incurred the majority of surcharges. However, when asked, the finance officer disagreed with the directors and stated commercial customers who considered the surcharges a cost of doing business incurred the vast majority of surcharges. Clearly, the board had contradictory and insufficient information on which to vote on the issue. The resolution warranted more research and review by an ad hoc conservation committee as proposed by the lone dissenter, Director Rice. Sadly, her argument against approval of the resolution fell on deaf ears, and the board adopted the resolution extending the suspension of surcharges through October 31. So while there are water conservationists among us who now pay more for less water, who avoided surcharges by standing in plastic tubs while showering and using that water to flush our toilets, and who watch plants wither and die for lack of water, others, not as conservation-minded, simply decided to observe the price of exceeding their water allotment as the cost of doing business. Should they be rewarded for flagrantly exceeding their allotment? By extending the suspension of surcharges, this board did just that on October 25. One more thought. At the last meeting, this board approved the purchase of a much-needed fire engine. I'm certain you will not find a Cambrian among us who would object to the purchase. Its cost is $622,315 plus interest. Restating the penalty surcharges on those who exceed their water allotments would go a long way toward that purchase. This community deserves financially accountable directors who will improve our infrastructure, rebuild public trust, and who will be fair to all. We have 4 candidates vying for incumbencies in November.
Thank you very much.
We deserve
Appreciate
better
it.
than we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and next on item 5, we have Tina Dickinson.
I would just like to express my great amount of discontent with this board, with previous boards, with the money that is being spent as if there's no tomorrow. I predict that as last November, we were down to practically zero in the general fund. We're spending the 4-point-whatever million came in. And as far as the 5%, I have stayed in touch with DWR, Public Works. That 5% will not be coming in until the Urban Water Management Plan update is into them. It could take up to a year. So while you may think that a lot of us don't really do much homework. We are doing a lot of homework. I know I do. And so I'm going to say I just got back from a week in Santa Cruz and had a wonderful time. Just got back at 3:15. And as my husband was driving, I made this sign up because Cambrians, I'm sick and tired of what we have. And I would say...
This is not in
No,
our
this is public
jurisdiction.
comment, and I
This
can
is-
say whatever I want at public comment, Madam
Actually-
President.
Actually,
I have the
you
right to
cannot.
do this, and I'm
This is
saying...
not about a campaign.
Yes, it is. This is public comment about you folks running for re-election and who may be replacing you. Absolutely, I have that right. Read the Brown Act. Read the Constitution. We've had this argument before. You still don't get it.
We have no responsibility for elections.
No one said you did, but I have a responsibility as an individual and to my community.
Would you continue and
You've
please be
interrupted me.
civil?
This is the third meeting you've done this to me, and it has to stop. It has to stop.
Would you like to finish?
Yeah, well, how much time have I got now? Thank you, General Manager. I'm just saying that I am not pleased. I have a right to say that. The spending is out of control. The amount of time that has been spent on the EWS and how much it's going to cost to continue it, there's nothing else getting done, and very little that I can see. And I would like to see it in the General Manager's report. The General Manager did get back to me on a question I had at the last meeting. He told me that, or in response to something I said, that the CCSD was billed for public records requests that I or others may make to other agencies. I called other agencies or emailed them. That is not the case. And Mr. Gruber says on August 31st, "Good morning, Tina. I hope this email finds you well. Bob is in interviews today. However, I will forward you the email to Justin and ask that the production number be provided to you. I also want to apologize for the statement I said at the last board meeting regarding state agencies charging for inquiries made by the public. I inadvertently was thinking of an invoice I received that related to something else." I just want to read that for clarification. You're not being billed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on public comment for item 5, Christina Tobin.
Hi, I'm Christina Tobin, founder of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. I just flew in from New York last night. Very challenging to get here after a holiday weekend, but I'm here, and I commend everybody else here who made it as well. And I wanted to address the last meeting, I feel inaccurate accusation regarding a recent ad that was put in the Cambrian by concerned Cambrians, and the ad said, "The Cambria Community Service District Board of Directors has been a major disappointment to the larger Cambria community. If you attend the CCSD meetings, you will be concerned too. CCSD discourages public participation. Last-minute presentations include indecipherable figures and documents not made available prior to the meetings, and so on. This board continues to overcommit Cambrians to unsustainable future debt. Cambria's 6,000 residents are being taxed in the future to pay for the developer profits, land speculators, and seasonal tourism. Turning their backs on the best interests of the Cambrians, the board has done only what is necessary to reward those who seek benefit. The board wanted to give the general manager a non-elected official a double-digit increase to his already excessive salary and benefits. Fortunately, the public outcry forced them to reduce the raise to 6%. The board still hasn't funded the forest management plan to make our unique, can everybody hear me still? Monterey pine forest healthier and less susceptible to catastrophic fire. The board manipulated the usual rotation to prevent Amanda Rice from taking her rightful role as vice president or president. 3 seats of the 5-member boards are up for election this November. They are now occupied by Greg Sanders, Gail Robinette, and Amanda Rice.
You cannot and should not address people by name. You should
Okay.
only
All
address the
Cambrians who
president.
want sensible solutions are willing to run for these positions and are. There are now 7 candidates running. Of course, the 3 incumbents I mentioned before.
As I said earlier, you can't use this forum for campaigning.
There's also Harry Farmer running, Dwayne Lee, Tom Kirky, and Jeff Walters. I mentioned them at the previous meeting. That wasn't an issue. So I wanted to also say a candidates forum will be announced this week, which I will be co-moderating with Emmy Award-winning actor Ed Asner. It's important to have more voices and more choices in our local elections, and I stand here as a resident of Cambria who cares about our community. And I welcome everybody to learn more about this forum. Watch for notices in the Cambrian, on Facebook, Cambria Currents, and Nextdoor Cambria. So thank you so much. Again, I will not be subject to continuous bullying by Mr. Greg Sanders, an attorney who I
Please,
felt
you
litigated
can't-
me
you're
during the
really
last
out of
meeting.
order.
It's
I'm
not
sorry to
okay,
tell
as
you
well as
that.
your board members. So I stand here
I'm sorry
for
you
my
put me in this
reputation.
position, but you are
I will
out
not
of
be
order. You
subject to your
cannot
false
attack
information
people
and
here at the board.
accusations anymore, Mr. Sanders. Thank you, Gail.
Next.
Madam President,
Do not wish to be responded to? Is that okay?
well, all right, then, for the record,
Gail?
for the record, the,
He can make, he is allowed a brief response.
thank you.
It's a brief response.
For the record, the advertisement that she read from was paid for by the Free and Equal Elections Foundation.
We already went through this. Gail? Can you please, do we need to
secondly,
repeat
He
ourselves?
He
just-
didn't, he
just a
didn't
question.
interrupt you, so you,
Just a question.
To conclude, though,
wh-
Mr.
What
Sanders.
is the Free and Equal Elections Foundation?
If you go to freeandequal.org, you can learn more about it there.
Well, It has a Chicago.
But we're at a meeting. I don't want to take up.
It has
No.
a Chicago area code. Is it headquartered
Oh,
in Chicago?
that's my phone number since I was 16 years old. I live here in
Okay.
Cambria.
So is
Okay.
it organized in Illinois?
No.
Where's it organized?
You can discuss that with my law firm if you'd like.
Sure, would you give me their information?
That's not appropriate.
why don't you two talk
I feel like I'm
about
being
this?
interrogated right now and bullying once again. This is
Okay.
Well,
absurd.
I'm not, I'm just
I'm
asking
going to have you
questions.
both. I'll have you
Really?
both
You're
stop.
asking this right now? It's
Okay,
inappropriate.
Christina, I want
It's very
both of you to
inappropriate.
stop. Both of you to stop, please.
So
Thank you.
please support more voices and more choices and replacing, well, having more people on the board running for office. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think the two of you talked about information that you're both trying to share. And if you care to continue conversations outside the board meetings, it's entirely up to you. But we need to move on. Thank you. Okay. And also on item 5, public comment, Harry Farmer.
Good afternoon. Is this
Good
working?
afternoon.
Good. Good afternoon, members of the board, luminaries to my left. I first want to thank the board of directors for changing the time of the meeting. I mean, it's a beautiful day outside. Normally, we would have had to been here at 12:30 and missed the previous 3.5 hours. So I just want to thank you for that and start off on that tone. What I'd like to address right now, if you don't mind, is a letter to the editor that was written in the August 18th issue. And it was signed by... It was signed, thank you. And it was signed by a former member of the board of directors. And it starts out, reading letters to the editor has led me to believe that some writers regarding CCSD are living in an alternative reality. I've read a number of the letters as well, and I totally agree with this statement. We're probably just coming from a totally different perspective on reality. But in moving further down, he talks about the fact that their agenda is to replace the current board with a do-nothing majority who will mothball the project for good, though the installation costs will still need to be paid. I personally know of no one in this community, even some of, let's say, the eccentric supporters of the challengers, that are going to be, and myself included, that are going to be mothballing, thinking of even mothballing the current sustainable water system. And this kind of tactic reminds me of what happened to me when I ran in 2010, when there was a letter to the editor that stated that let's put it this way, there was at that time an effort to recall 3 members of the board. So in 2010, a former member of the board wrote a letter stating that I was involved, not just with the recall of the 3 incumbents, but that I had told lies about them. That was an absolute falsehood. And yet this was printed in the paper. I was involved with other issues with regard to preserving Strawberry Canyon, preserving Friends of the Ranch, Fiscalini Ranch. I didn't have time or the inclination to be involved with the recall movement. Bringing us up to speed to the present. This current election, in my humble estimation, in the 3 decades that I've lived here, is the most important election this community has ever had, and it will definitely determine the future of our town. Honesty and an open discussion of the issues that are of concern to all members of our community, all the citizenry of Cambria, is the high road that we should take in this election. I should remind people that this is Cambria. People come here to live, 30 seconds. People come here to live and retire. Very creative, imaginative, talented people come here to either explore their creative muse or to just enjoy life here in Cambria. And people travel from all over the world to visit Cambria because it's Cambria. Those of us that are running for public office, our supporters, let's take the high road. The citizens of our community deserve the best that we have to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, no further request for public comment on item 5, so we will move now to item 6, the General Manager's report. And so General Manager Gruber, we're ready to hear from you.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to keep my report as brief as possible, although I have quite a few PowerPoint presentations and some pictures. There's a comment just briefly made about not making an effort or something along the line to take care of the infrastructure, and I think our legacy, at least since I've been here, and the board's legacy, is to continue to make improvements to the infrastructure. Maybe not to the extent that I would like to see it done, but we're still making progress, and I think that's the important thing. So I don't have a clicker, so if you guys could just walk me through this, that would be great. Next slide, please. Who's got the clicker? Anybody got the clicker? Okay. Bob, you want to click me? Okay, so this is facilities and resources. This is the dead and dangerous trees that are being cut down. The tree will make into 2 sitting benches at Veterans Hall. So this is part of the area that was behind the wastewater treatment plant. If you get a chance, that whole area behind the wastewater treatment plant has been mitigated and cleaned up from all the dead trees, and that whole fence line has been replaced, so it looks really good back there. Next slide. This is what the trees look like after they've been ready to be milled. Next slide. So when we did that work, about the 300 trees or so, we actually milled some of the lumber from the Monterey pines into these boards. Beautiful, beautiful boards. We still have quite a few of them, and we'll be continuing to make benches throughout the community and using those to continue to use the pine to the Monterey pines throughout the community. Next one. That's some of the milled product after the trees were cut down. You can see that you can't buy stuff like that in the hardware store. That's for sure. Next slide. The logs are being milled and ready for the facilities and maintenance yard. Next slide. This is the facilities and maintenance staff. They're actually making a bench out of that milled wood. Next slide. These are the stands that will support those new benches made from the Monterey pines. Go ahead. You're doing great, Bob. So if you go out front, if we take a break, it's been nice to drive by and see people sitting on these benches that are here in town visiting or just living here. But they look really nice, and those were the products of the trees that were cut down from behind the wastewater treatment plant. And this is something that we did back in, these were what our old trash cans look like. This is what the district's done for the community. You remember we had old trash cans, and we applied for a grant, and go ahead. And what we have are these now, and Beautify Cambria worked with a whole bunch of different folks, tourism board, and these were fabricated right here in town. And then what you'll see in top is a succulent plants. And then I'd like to thank Harry. Harry's been doing a lot of work, Mr. Farmer, in maintaining these. That's one of the reasons they look so good. And then we have different organizations and businesses throughout town, not fully engaged yet, but they're doing a lot of the work. But So that looks a lot better than what we had. And that was a project the district took on. So this is our wastewater treatment plant. This is the main valve that comes into the plant. Without going in a lot of detail, it hadn't been operational for quite a few years, which means you couldn't bypass the plant if you needed to during high rains. It left us with some pretty limited operational choices. So we excavated it and dug it out. Next slide, Bob. And this is all within the last couple months. If you look on that right-hand side there on the slide to the left, you can see a concrete barrier we had to dig through. There was electrical conduit in there, so it was kind of a tough operation. But that's our Vector truck, which we need to get a new one. Our Vector truck helped excavate the project. And then we put a new, you can look on the right-hand side, that's a brand new valve. That was a major project. That valve was the original valve that was installed in the plant. So when we look to put in the influent bar screen, which is underway, it's going to be important that we have that bypassing capability. So that's a brand new valve at the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide. That's what it looks like once it's asphalted all over and cleaned up and everything. We bypassed once that valve was being changed out, we had to bypass the plant, the head of the plant, and stick it right into the aeration basins. And after the valve was replaced, they were able to jet the lines into the plant. They had installed a bypass from the front of the plant and discharged directly into the aeration basin. So why jetting that line and cleaning that line was so important that it's really never been done. And as you know, we don't have an influent screen, so that line going into the plant, the main line going into the plant, had a lot of debris in it. And so we cleaned all that out, and what that's going to enable us to do is have a more even flow to the plant. You're not going to have a restricted main line coming into the plant. It's completely cleaned out right now. And those are digesters in the background. So next slide. The wastewater department has been working on cleaning out the digesters. These this is what you waste into. Your wastewater plant needs three things. It's like it's like us. It needs air, it needs food, and it needs something to discharge your waste. We have those three things or we die. And so that's where we waste into the digesters, but we've actually cleaned the digesters all the way out. That's never been done. And what we're doing now is processing biosolids on a daily basis, where what the previous management and staff did is they just stockpiled the waste in the digesters, and then once a year they would process it. So we've got these things cleaned out, but when we got them cleaned out, we also replaced some valves. These pictures don't really show it, but we also we replaced valves and some other things that you just couldn't get to before. So it's gonna make the overall plant operation a lot better. It's going to reduce the odor in the plant, and it's going to, there's just no need to stockpile, or there's no need to have 500,000 gallons of sludge in digesters, especially with that small of a facility. So next slide, Bob. Okay, so this, the wastewater department emptied the flow effluent equalization ponds that are pumping the sludge from the digesters. So on the left there, they're cleaning the digesters out. And then on the right, we have ponds at the wastewater treatment plant that had never been cleaned out. Those were completely emptied out and cleaned by the wastewater staff, so they're working really hard. You can see them standing on some catwalks and some rails right there. We'll be replacing those, and that's actually being done in-house. Staff has already fabricated the first run of handrails. They've turned out really nice, so we'll be doing all that internally. We had put a good chunk of money into the budget for that, but we think we can do that in-house and get those catwalks and get all that stuff replaced and upgraded. And those ponds are cleaned out now too. So next slide. This is what they look like when the flow effluent equalization ponds are now empty. They were full, like I said, for many, many years, and now they're cleaned out. We have 3 of these, and we've inspected them. They don't have standing water anymore, and if we can use these, during high flows. If we get a really heavy rain, we have, what's the capacity of these, Bob? A couple 100,000 each or something. 100. Yeah. So say they're 200,000 gallons each. If we get a really heavy rain, we can always divert the flow now that we've replaced the influent valve to the wastewater treatment plant. We can put the flow into these, and then once the heavy rains and everything pass, we can slowly feed it back into the plant. So you can't do that when these are full. So now they're empty, ready for the stormy season to come, and if we get a really, really heavy flow, we now have the capability to bypass the flow into these. Next slide. That's the guys down in there cleaning it out, inspecting. They're aerated. They have aeration piping going down in there, and so they're inspecting those and making the necessary repairs to those, because you want to aerate if there is water in there, keep it fresh. Next slide. That's another picture what it looks like, completely cleaned out. You can see that there was a buildup of sludge in the bottom. That's that brown stuff on the bottom of the corner. We kept some of it in there for the picture, so it's all cleaned out and ready to go. When the plant, we're still going to be talking about this, but when we do build a new facility, this may be an opportunity for us to use flow equalization. We may be able to use these. Bob and I differ a little bit on that, but we'll work it out between us and the engineers and whatever we decide to do. But it's an ideal flow equalization. They're ideal for flow equalization. We'll see how that turns out. See who wins on that one. So next slide. We have both effluent pumps in the working on VFDs with the controls in the same location. So variable frequency drives. These are the effluent pumps. These are the pumps that pump out to the percolation ponds. Both of them have been rebuilt, completely rebuilt. The bases, if you see on the bottom of that pump, there's a silver plate. That was cracked because that pipe going out, that whole area had settled. And that's why you see that new blue flange right there. So we realigned it all. You can't rebuild a pump and put everything back together if it's not aligned perfectly. The same thing will happen. So we rebuilt the pumps, and we had the bases replaced. And now we have them on, they're called VFD, variable frequency drives, where you can control the speed in which you send the water out to the effluent pumps. And it's also tied into to the telemetry system at the wastewater plant. The water department has a complete telemetry system now. Everything is automated. What we're starting to do is we're starting to automate all the internal things at the wastewater treatment plant, the flows and all those things, wasting, return activated sludge, influent, effluent, all those things. And it not only can control them, but it gives you it can give you real-time data. You can go back at any given time, and it creates reports and graphs. So when we do design the new plant, we'll have a historical record of those things. So those pumps have been replaced. That white panel behind there, that's all been ripped out. It was just really not sure what purpose it served. It's all been cleaned up. All that's gone now, and it's all been made electrically and mechanically sound. What's the next slide? I think. Bob. The North Coast Tree Service has cleaned up the inside and outside of the wastewater plant. Justin DeLon in the wastewater department helped spread out the wood chips on the hill. So we needed some work. I was concerned of fire hazard and things like that, so we went in there and we trimmed up all the trees. We got a little too carried away, but that's okay. And so then afterwards, we went back and we put up a meshing, a fence, and then we took all the bark from the trees, and we landscaped all the entrance into the wastewater plant. So when you drive by now, it looks a lot better than it did before. And now we're in compliance with our own weed abatement program, which is a nice thing to do. So it just looks, if you drive on Windsor and you look at it, it looks a lot nicer. Next year we'll do some other things. Just in a snapshot, this is our SCADA system. The screen on the left is the old SCADA system. It was currently locked up, and the two screens on the right are the new replacements. Again, what we're doing is giving the operators the flexibility to monitor and control and operate the plant through telemetry. It's important. You can't really operate a wastewater treatment plant without the proper SCADA system. And SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. So up in the water department upstairs, we have a whole control center. We can control the entire water system remotely by smartphones, and now we're getting that way with the wastewater treatment plant. We'll have the capability for the wastewater treatment plant to be completely modernized in SCADA, and what's really important about this is, again, you can go back and retrieve real-time information or real-time data and see how the plant's behaving and what you want the pumps to do. Whether you're wasting or your internal recirculation, you can control all that through this. So that's the bottom picture is the office off the lab. And so next slide. This is, here's the same controls at the pump. So this is a touch tone screen or touch applied screen. So if you go in there and you touch it, it brings up different menus. It's not just that. So as you scroll through it, it brings up the whole plant and each pump and each motor, and you can control the different RPMs and what you want it to do. So that's our main screen right there. And Bob's been really instrumental in working with the wastewater guys and Alpha Electric on this. Next slide. We will be installing a VFD on the left control panel, again, a variable frequency drive. You always want to have a variable frequency drive, and that'll be for the blowers, our main blowers for the plant. Next slide. So this is staff working on the online analyzer calibration. We're jumping to water now. This is for the sustainable water facility. Every time we bring this back online, every time we restart it, we have to recalibrate all the instruments, and we have to recalibrate all the analyzers to make sure, and we get those checked, and to make sure that they haven't fallen out of calibration, and make sure that all the recording devices that we have that are monitoring the sustainable water facility are accurate. Next slide. That's doing the same thing, just doing some more calibrations. Next slide. So vacuum sealed RO reverse osmosis elements awaiting installation. As you know, we talked about pickling the membranes. We thought at first that that's something we'd want to do, and we realize now that that's not the best thing to do for a whole plethora of reasons. This is one of the major components of the sustainable water facility. These RO units have a life, and we want to be able to sustain that life as long as possible. So at the end, what we do is we send them off, and they're professionally sealed, and they're put in a solution, and then they're delivered back to us. And then go to the next slide. And this is the RO units elements being reinstalled. They didn't sit there during the whole off season. They were taken out and shipped off, and now we're reinstalling them. Go ahead, next slide. That's just what one of them looks like. It took about 2 days to do it. This is staff, but we also have H2O Concepts overseeing what we're doing to make sure that we're doing it right, doing it properly. So we're getting trained so we can do it in the future. This is the first time we've done it. RO elements are installed and ready for startup. Next slide. There's some more of the plant. As you can see, it's a very, very technical plant. It's a very so let's go back to wastewater. This is the blower. We had this rewound. There's 4 blowers at the wastewater treatment plant. At one time, 3 of them were down, which only left us 1. So we got this one completely, the bearings, the front and rear bearings redone, and we got it completely rewound. So this is, when this plant was built, they never incorporated the ability to control these things. So they run 24 hours a day. So we have implemented some variable frequency drives that we can, and we're ultimately going to put dissolved oxygen probes in that interface with these, so we can cut back on our electrical cost. So we have this one rebuilt, and I think we've rebuilt, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, I think we've rebuilt 2 other ones, or at least 1 other one. So we have 3 blowers now that are completely rebuilt. The bearings had never been done. So next slide, Bob.
So that should say wastewater, not water.
Yeah, it should say wastewater. You're absolutely right. So this is a Fiscalini tank. Go back to the, that should say wastewater, yes. This is the Fiscalini tank. This is the start of the demo process. This tank was identified about 8 years ago. It needed to be replaced. It was brought to our attention by the state, and the board finally just said, you know, let's go ahead and get it done. So It's a bolted tank, which we don't want to use this application anymore. When we replace Stewart Street tank, Pine Knolls tanks are not bolted. You don't want to use a bolted tank in this environment. It's probably the worst application you can use. But we did, so because at the cost, and it served its life, so we're cutting it apart. Next one. That's what it looks like with the first piece being cut off of the Fiscalini tank. Go ahead, Bob. It being hauled off. And there's some of the equipment that's set up. Go ahead, Bob. That's what it looks like with the roof totally disassembled. And they're making good progress. This is a test of the firefighting equipment. William, we required the contractors to have a very robust fire protection mitigation pump reservoir in place. And if you look behind that fence, we cleared all the land out on the around the Fiscalini tank because we didn't want any of the welding sparks from the job igniting anything. So we cut the trees back, we cleared it all out, and then we went a step farther. We replaced all the fencing around there. Mr. Fiscalini had some concerns about the condition of the fencing, and rightfully so. So we went in and replaced all that. And if you look beyond that fence, we went ahead and mitigated an additional area so it would not, even if there was a spark to get out, it would not ignite his area right behind the property. So we're being very safe about this, and so far with Mr. Fiscalini, everything's going exceptionally well, and with the Crosno Constructions, everything's going really well on the project. Next slide. This is the aerial shot from up on the tank, and that's the area this is Mr. Fiscalini's property. We've cleaned it up, and we made sure that there's no risk of fire. That unit right there is a unit that with the pump and a reservoir in case anything was to happen. So we just wanted to make sure that we were really safe on this project. Go ahead. That's that. Just a few more things. I had mentioned in my general manager's report that we had received 3 correspondence from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. The first one was an NOV, which was a notice of violation, and if you recall, that was for the chlorine residual that we had on the sustainable water facility last year. That they finally, the Water Resources Control Board finally got around to giving us an NOV on that. That notice was posted for 30 days, public comment, and we got that 30 days passed, and I went ahead and paid. There was a $3,000 fine on that notice of violation. Regional Water Quality Control Board came out and inspect the brine pond. That's something they do every year, and they noticed that there was some intrusions by gophers. They also noticed that some of the fences needed to be repaired. That was the second letter that we got from them. And we have a gopher mitigation plan that Bob's working on with an exterminator, and we had a fence company out there the other day, and I went ahead and authorized the repair of that fence and all the associated fences that needed repaired around the sustainable water facility. And then there was another notice from Regional Water Quality Control Board. We were behind on some reports. And the semi-annual report has been submitted, and there are some other reports that we're a little bit behind on the sustainable water facility, but it's because we have not received the test information back from the labs yet. And so we're in correspondence with them, and as soon as we get the test results back from the lab, we'll go ahead and get those reports done and submit them to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. The Urban Water Management Plan, Bob and I are going to be working with Madaus Water Management on that. We had to wait to get the demand projections that are in the EIR updated, and so we'll be working with that. And once, I don't think it's going to take a year. I think it's probably going to take, I'm not going to say, but a couple of months. Me and Bob and Madaus Management will get the Urban Water Management Plan, and once we get that, we'll get our 5% back from the state. I just wanted to clarify the difference between a time extension on our permits and a licensing. And if you read the EIR, there's mention in there that, and that's definitely a board policy, but we'll be moving forward with licensing, and what Senator Flores was talking about is there is 1,000 water agencies in California right now that have not completed that process and that licensing process. And it's historically based on the amount of water you use versus the amount of water that was previously given to us. So it's a process, and we're working on that. I think that's everything. I've covered a lot. Local hazard mitigation plan. We finally got information back from that on the county. We've decided to go with Category 5, Cat 5. The grant was for $30,000. The low bid came in at $39,500. So we'll go ahead and pay the $9,500 difference on the and get that local hazard mitigation plan going. Senator Flores, we also attended a meeting with the PUC, Public Utilities Commission, regarding the cogeneration facility. And we're in dialogue. I'm in dialogue. Dan Turner and myself are in dialogue with the folks up in Berkeley. And we've asked for a proposal for them for the cogeneration facility. And again, that'll be a board policy decision, but it's something that could really help out the community. I think that's everything. The EIR is on the website. It's on the website, got posted. In my general manager's report, I said that we didn't think we could get it done in August. It'd probably be a little bit later, and that's not true. Obviously, we did get it done, and I want to thank Bob for that, and the EIR ad hoc committee. It was posted, and it's on the website. And but just want to say that you know, we're gonna continue to improve the infrastructure. I'll have more slides on the later on this month, but that's what we're doing. We're continuously improving the infrastructure. Pumps, motors, blowers, lift station, wells, telemetry. We're just going to keep doing that. Reservoirs. The next big project I think that we need to do and think about, and I think the board's on board with this, is the Rodeo Grounds pump station and the Stewart Street tanks. Those need to be replaced next, and I'm confident during my tenure that we'll get that done. So with that, I know it's supposed to be a short report, but with that, I'll answer any questions that you guys may have, the board may have.
Well, first of all, thank you. That was highly informative. And so I think you covered a lot of ground this afternoon, for sure. And I don't think I'll ever forget the digesters, so thank you very much. Okay. Then let's see. Do we have any comments?
I'd rather hear public comment first.
Oh, you want to hear public comment first? All right. We do have 2 requests for public comment, and then we'll have comments or discussion from the board. So first then on this item 6, we have Elizabeth Bettenhausen. It's not over. We're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I guess this is on. I'm Elizabeth Bettenhausen from Cambria, and just finished cleaning up 2 oven racks. So I'm sort of on cleanup mode, I guess. I want to thank the state of California for requiring us to get some work done on that sewer plant. I think it was a good idea of them to reduce the fine that we would have had to pay up in the hundreds of thousands, and we're making great progress. So I want to thank the state of California for requiring us to do what we often should be doing just out of our own astute public service. I do have a question. In General Manager Gruber's report, he referred twice in that PowerPoint to, quote, when we do build a new facility, end quote, and quote, when we design the new plant, end quote. I hope that you take earthquakes into account. What is this about, this new plant? I'm really curious to get the details on it. Obviously, it's underway. I would like to know how much the RO pickling costs, but on the other hand, I love to do dill pickles, so that's just my interest in the pickling process. I have a question. What progress has been made on the county letter to which I referred last time on revising the development plan, including a new project description of the SWF, of getting more adequate monitoring reports, that was somewhat covered but not quite for the county, and a response to the July 15th, 2014 letter? I have heard nothing about that. I raised it at the last beginning of this meeting back when. I would like to note, and it's just, I beg your pardon, Madam President, you are right now going to hear once again Elizabeth's ego, because in November of 2014, I stood in San Luis Obispo at the Regional Water Quality Control Board meeting and talked to them about pocket gophers. And now I get, thanks very much to the district clerk's assistant, whatever the title, she's excellent. I got today the letter referring to the fence out there at the SWF, and guess what? Those pocket gophers. Now, I dug up a plant the other day at home, and it was planted in a tough plastic container. So guess what? The pocket gophers couldn't get it. And I took a photograph of it after I dug it up, because the plant was totally gone, and so was the bottom of the thick plastic, eaten away by the pocket gopher who happened to love the plant. I look forward 30 seconds to the plan that's now being developed. Sounded just like the November 2014 plan to keep the deer and the pocket gophers away from the evap ponds, although perhaps we won't have much in the evap ponds. If I get the EIR read, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. General Manager Gruber.
Yes, Madam President, I'll handle the first two, and then I'll let Bob handle the SWF question. So the talk about a new facility, really, the genesis of that was, if you remember, about 2 years ago, a Regional Water Quality Control Board came in and gave a workshop on the TMDL, the total maximum daily load. Well, since then, because of these improvements and other improvements, their concern was based on the nitrate levels leaving the plant. Historically, the plant has had high nitrate levels, 30 and 40 milligrams per liter. We've modified it so those nitrate levels, the last levels were ND, which is non-detect, and the last levels for ammonia nitrates were non-detect. So since then, the Regional Water Quality Control Board has not issued us something in writing that says you will build a new facility within a specific amount of time. But we can anticipate that at some point in time that's going to come. And I think we're being proactive in seeking grants and other things like that. There is no mandate by the board to say we're going to build a new facility. There is no funding mechanism other than grants to build that facility. The state is not coming in and saying you will build a new facility. But at some point in time, we realize that we'll need to do that. But in the interim, what we're doing is continuously improving our facility. The water quality that we're putting out of the back of that plant right now is AWT, advanced treatment. The nitrate levels and the ammonia levels are ND, which is unheard of. So we're completely denitrifying. So Regional Water Quality Control Board, and I can't speak for them, but they've backed off on the TMDL issue because they're not as concerned about it as they used to be because of the quality of water we put out of the back of the plant. The pickling runs about $20,000 a year. I don't have that exact budget figure. I'm looking over to Patrick, but the cost would have been at least as much for us to put the chemicals in, monitor it, unpickle it, have staff take care of it during the whole year when it's offline, and have the risk of them possibly inadvertently damaging the membranes, which would have been significantly more cost. So it was a staff decision made to do that, and I think it was the right decision. Bob, I think you're going to handle. You've been really working on the gopher, and I could tell you some gopher studies or gopher stories that I have, but it's not exactly humane how I dispose of them. So, but they can cut through plastic and everything else. So you're absolutely right.
We are checking on Bill Murray to see if he's available, but we don't know yet. But the SWF, essentially in the EIR, we describe a project without modifications and with modifications and a no project alternative. As we make it through the EIR process, or the CEQA process, the board will decide whether to certify that EIR, and that'll determine what the project description will be. So once we have that determination made, we'll go ahead and update the regular coastal development permit application and that project description that goes along with that. So as you make your way through the EIR, which went out on the 31st of August, I think it'll become clearer to what is proposed as far as that project description.
Madam President, if I could just ask one key detail. The county wants this done by September 30th. So are there negotiations with the county to do it that much later? Or all three that I mentioned, they say September 30th is the deadline?
Do you want to respond to that?
Well, we can provide them with the EIR description and then just condition it based on the future board adoption of that happening. But I didn't want to commit to a project description until we went through the full public review process and received comments and then had the board act on it. So I'll have to check on the September 30th date in their letter. And it's been a while since I read that letter, quite frankly, so thank you for reminding us of that time. And if we have to ask for an extension on that based on the project that's out there right now, we will. So.
Thank you, Mr. Gershon. Okay, all right, no further responses, any discussion, comments? Okay, then we are, let's see. We have this now, don't we? Yes. We have another request for public comment now from Tina Dickinson.
Thank you. Last meeting, I asked 3 times for the production for July, excuse me,
David.
And I didn't get a response, but I was back and forth with emails to the general manager. I finally got a number, but it is not in the staff agenda packet. It's not in there. So June is in there, 44.76. I did get a response that it was 51 point, and I don't have the exact number with me, acre feet for July. But why it's not in the staff packet is a bit of a mystery. The other thing is, what are the well levels? There's nothing since August 1st, and how anybody can read these black, they're supposed to be colored. I mean, how on earth can anybody read and understand what these graphs are supposed to tell us? I mean, there are only 2 binders out there. I would think we could get 2 binders with a few colored graphs to help us determine what they actually say. I live on Park Hill, so of course I drive by the wastewater treatment plant frequently, and I had noticed a ton of activity taking place. I also knew that there were issues that were brought to the attention, as Elizabeth Bettenhausen mentioned, to the district by the regional board, by the state, that there were enforcement issues, and so I guess that's what really drove it all. But I have to say that I'm really very pleased that something has been done and that all these upgrades have been taken care of. But I'm going to say one thing that I don't quite understand, and at night there are floodlights that are lighting that whole wastewater treatment plant area, really, really bright lights that have not been on before. So if the general manager, the engineer, could tell me about why they're on, and I feel sorry for the neighbors that are right above there because it's huge. The other thing is with the evaporation pond out at Van Gordon and San Simeon Creek Road. I go out there every 4 weeks and take photos and of the condition of the pond. And I was forwarded a photo from the regional board of someone that took a photo of 2 deer inside the evaporation pond itself. I'd be happy to forward that to you. I will be including it in my comments and for the draft EIR. Of course, now we see in the draft EIR, you're not going to probably be dealing with it unless you truck the sludge out, the waste out. So we don't really know all the money that was spent on the blowers and whatever, but that's for the draft EIR comments. I just would like to know where we're at with production. If we're up to 51 point whatever in July, we're now September 6th, so where's the production maybe for August? It seems to be going up. And if state parks had been on board using our water, I really have to wonder what the acre footage would be in production. Thank you.
Thank you. General Manager Gruber, and then we're going to take a little break.
Madam
A request.
President,
It was a request.
we do have July's, and I'll give this to, it should be on the website. I apologize if it isn't. We're in the process also of completely redoing our website, so we want it to be a lot better than it is now. So, but in July, San Simeon was 30.40 acre feet. The previous July was 29.51, and then Santa Rosa was 20.45 in July for a total of 50.85 acre feet, and that is up. June was 44.76 acre feet, and we're at 50.85 acre feet in July. As soon as we get production from August, I'll make sure that everybody gets that. I apologize. The last well levels that I'm aware of, and I had told Kathy, I thought that we had got some additional well levels. I'll check with Justin. It was August 1st, which is just way too long. So I'll make sure that if we have got well levels between now and then, that they're posted and that the information is given to Tina and put on our website. If we haven't, I'll make sure that we get well levels in this week or the first of next week. I think the colored graphs is a great idea. So I want Haley to make a note that when we do have board packets out there, that the graphs are board packets for the community, that they're not black like that, so you can't read them. I think we can do better on that. So we'll print a couple that make sure they're colored. She's absolutely right about the wastewater plant. There was no lights before. The reason we committed to going in, and it's an infrastructure improvement, is we went ahead and fixed all the lights. When operators respond at night for safety reasons, there was no lights, and there hadn't been lights for years. So we got them all fixed. But I think that Bob and I need to work with John and see if there is a light that is a little dimmer, that still meets the safety requirements, so if people have to go out there and work at night to pull a pump, but not like floodlights. I wouldn't want to look at that either. So there are lights you can install now that we've fixed everything electrically that are a little softer, and they should be. One of the letters that I mentioned from Regional Water Quality Control Board, upon their inspection, they addressed two issues. One was the gophers, and one was their concerns about the pictures that they received about deer being in there. As I mentioned earlier in my staff report, we've already had fence people out there. I gave Bob the okay today to go ahead and get that done. He'll be writing a PO, and we'll get that fence repaired so we don't have deer coming anymore in there. And again, we'll make sure we get the August production records out as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. So I think at this time, before we move on then to the next item, we will take about a 10-minute break. Thank you. Okay, if you would please take your seats. And we have now moving on to item 9. Thank you. Okay. We're moving on now. We have on item 9 today, we have 2 items. And so we will start with the first item, and if you will introduce that, please, General Manager Gruber.
Thank you, Madam President and board members. Item 9A is Water Emergency, May 22nd, 2014. Action suspending outstanding intent to serve letters and consideration of lifting the suspension. I'm going to let District Engineer Bob Greshams talk a little bit about this, particularly the one case that's referenced in here. And with that, Bob, if you could go ahead and handle this report, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. Yes, Madam President, members of the board, this is dealing with water emergency of May 22nd, 2014, the action suspending the outstanding intent to serve letters and consideration of lifting the suspension. The recommendation by staff is that the board of directors review the stage 3 water emergency as well as the suspension of outstanding intent to serve letters established by the board on the May 22nd, 2014 date. Consider allowing assessor parcel number 03-084-051, which is 6660 Evelyn Court, to connect to the water system, and direct staff to bring back other parcels with suspended intent to serve letters on a case-by-case basis when the underlying projects are ready to connect to the CCSD water and wastewater systems. As far as the fiscal impact, to the extent that the intent to serve letters are suspended for projects that are ready to proceed, there will continue to be a delay in the payment of applicable connection fees. Only one project with a suspended intent to serve letter is ready to connect to the water system. If allowed to connect, the CCSD would receive a connection fee of $12,688. Just discussion during June 23rd of 2016, the board directed staff to bring this item back and to add a discussion item regarding lifting of the stage 3 water emergency. Staff recommends that the stage 3 water emergency not be lifted for the following reasons. One is we remain in a prolonged drought, and I'll just summarize here. If you want me to go back and get into details, I will. As of August 1, 2016, the average level for San Simeon wells was 14.39 feet. Historically, the wells within San Simeon well field drop as the summer continues. Operating protocols established when the well levels in San Simeon approach 10 feet, and based on historical data, it can be anticipated that a 10-foot trigger level for starting the sustainable water facility will occur soon. As of August 1, 2016, the hydraulic gradient for the San Simeon wastewater mound was at 1.76 feet. And then historical data shows that the hydraulic gradient will continue to drop, and proactive measures will be taken to prevent saltwater intrusion. As of August 1, 2016, the monitoring well WBE, that's one at Santa Rosa Creek, was at 4.09 feet. If that continues to drop, due to the current permit requirements, the Santa Rosa wells cannot be operated once that well drops to 3 feet. So that's another concern. And the state is requiring the CCSD to conduct a second tracer study, which is to begin this month. The board also directed staff to bring back the item to review the May 22nd action in which the board suspended the ability to connect the water and wastewater systems. With regard to the suspension of intent to serve letters, Section 8.04-080E1 of our municipal code provides the following as follows. The intent to serve letter shall contain conditions reserving the right of the district to revoke the letter as a result of conditions imposed on the district by other governmental agencies. Then it's underlined, or by a change in availability of resources, comma, or by a change in ordinance, resolutions, rule of regulations adopted by the board of directors for the protection of health, safety, and welfare of the district. The intent to serve letter shall also contain a condition that issuance of the actual connection permit shall be subject to all permit fees enforced at the time of issuance of the connection permit. Then again, it's emphasis added, underlined. The intent to serve letter does not constitute a binding commitment to serve water or provide sewer service, and such letters may be revoked or suspended by the district at any time. So based upon the foregoing, and given the change of availability of resources experienced by the CCSD, it is well within the board's authority to suspend previously issued intent to serve letters. The specific action taken by the board also included extending the outstanding intent to serve letters for a period of 6 months after termination of the Stage 3 water shortage emergency or their current expiration date, whichever is later. Staff has reviewed each of the suspended intent to serve letters listed below and offer the following updated information for your consideration. Under single-family residential, we have the aforementioned Evelyn Court property. That intent to serve letter was issued originally on December 1, 2001. It was due to expire July 1, 2014. The minor use permit was issued, and the current status is that there's a building permit that was issued on October 20th of 2014, and it expires on October 20th, 2017. I might also add, because I'm a little familiar with this from the distant past, they did pay all their demand offset fees back in 2012 on this particular project. So there was a demand retrofit points that were paid for. I think there was 325 points they paid for back in that time frame. The second residential single-family unit is on Burton Drive. That particular one was due to expire on June 1, 2014. The minor use permit is pending, and the current status is it's withdrawn. Under multifamily, we have the property on Schoolhouse Lane with the People's Self-Help Housing. The intent to serve letter was issued on February 21st of 2013, was due to expire on August 21, 2014. The current status is on hold pending the submittal of additional information to the county, and all connection in lieu fees for this project have been paid. There's another multifamily one. This is on Green Street at Londonderry. Its intent to serve letter was issued on December 10th of 1998. This intent to serve letter was a subject to prolonged litigation, and its current status is it was withdrawn. Another one on Londonderry, at Green Street at Londonderry. It was also a subject of litigation, was due to expire on May 27, 2015. I don't have the status on that particular one. Was that, do you recall if that was withdrawn? I don't, okay. Commercial, there are 3 parcels listed. The first one is on Cornwall Street. The property owner is Slow County. Intent to serve letter was issued September 8th of 2000. It was due to expire on June 1, 2017. The current status is that it was withdrawn. The second commercial is at 6276 Moonstone Beach Drive. Its intent to serve letter was issued on March 1 of 1999, due to expire July 25th of 2015, and the current status is that it expired. The third one is Londonderry at Ardith, and that intent to serve letter was issued November 1 of 1998, was due to expire June 1 of 2015, and the current status is that it was withdrawn. So there is only one project with a suspended intent to serve letter that is ready to proceed to connect to the CCSD water system, and that project is the single-family residence located at 660 Evelyn Court. And according to Senior Planner Erlen Singwald, a building permit was issued for a single-family residence on October 20th of 2014. This building permit has not been finalized yet, and it expires October 20th, 2017. The subject property is located in the Lamert Tract and therefore is only required to connect to the water system. If allowed to proceed, a connection fee of $12,688 would be due and payable prior to connection. And in conclusion, there is no other project with a suspended intent to serve letter that is ready to connect to the CCSD water and wastewater systems. It is recommended that the board consider allowing other projects with suspended intent to serve letters to connect on a case-by-case basis when they are ready to proceed. And with that, I'll close, and maybe we're ready to answer questions you may have at this point. Thank you.
We take public comment at this time, and then we have discussion. That's the standard operation.
I'd like to hear it.
So first, we have on public comment, a request for public comment now from Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to say that in my understanding of English, which is really, really but not pertinent to all this, I'm sure, suspended should not be the synonym of withdrawn or expired. If something is withdrawn, it ain't here anymore. And if it's expired, it's dead. So set aside all of those here, and all you have left is Evelyn Court, or Lyon, or whatever it is out there in Lemert, and the people's self-help. Then the question becomes, is there, quote, a change in availability of resources, end quote. I assume that's referring to the SWF, the Sustainable Water Facility. Maybe it refers to something else, I don't know, but I assume it does. So my suggestion is that you take no action on the Evelyn Court issue, which is the only one before you today. The rest should never show up in an agenda again, unless they want to submit a whole new request. Then it's not expired, then it's resubmitted. You have to finish the Urban Water Master Plan. You have to look at the demand projections that are in the EIR and the Urban Water Master Plan. You have to finish the tracer test, and you have to finish the EIR and all of the permit requirements before you can know that you have a real change in the availability of water. Before that, your action would be totally premature on Evelyn Court. You do not have the position now, by authority of your own rules and regulations, to take action on this today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Tina Dickinson.
Tina Dickinson, thank you. On this item, a couple of things. As the county points out through the senior planner, Erilyn Singewald, that the building permit has not been finalized yet and expires October 20th, 2017. I drove by this property. It is gigantic. Talk about a mansion. It's huge. This property also became subject of conversation at the NCAC, and that this particular individual, and there's someone here from NCAC on land use, maybe she could speak to this. There was an issue about this person having 44 units every 2 months for this property, and I think that needs to be looked into before any approval. But I have to agree that until we have all of our ducks in a row, we can't just be all of a sudden changing our minds when we have had these tremendous, horrendous fires, when we have the threat of the forest with more issues, when we are in a stage 3, and we are definitely not out of the woods, and pun intended, I guess, in any way, or we're not, and we're still up the creek, or creeks. So I would also say that the tracer test, no one's talked about how many acre feet are going to be. The last time was 134.4 acre feet to run the tracer test. I've not heard a word from the general manager or the engineer as to how much water is going to have to be used for the tracer test. Now, anytime. Now, this was submitted August 31st by CDM Smith for the to the DDW and the regional board. You have not, as today I found out, not heard back from the DDW on the proposal for the second tracer test. So there's another huge issue. I just think as the board talk about health, safety, and welfare of the district, that has to come before anything else, and the availability of water to this town, which we know has been critical. And I think at this time it would be a rather odd thing for you to do and highly questionable. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no further requests for public comment on this item. So let's start with discussion on the item. Director Sanders?
Madam President, I have some questions regarding the Evelyn Court parcel. How much construction has been completed on this project?
I don't believe any construction has been completed on it. To my mind, I didn't go up there to personally look at the property to make sure of this, but my understanding is that they did not. Did you hear anything different, Jerry, on that? I know that if it's in Lemert, there's already a main out in the street with the service stub to the property. So I'd have to answer your question with 100% certainty, and I have to drive by that property and look at it, and I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Well, a reference was made to a mansion being on the property. I took that to mean that the property owner pulled the permit, started construction, maybe has furthered the construction, that all is left is for the permit to be finalized, and the house will be complete. So I'm trying to get my arms around the history of this to determine where that property owner is in terms of completing his project.
I am going to ask for you to come up for a minute because you said you were there and it would clarify. Is there construction?
Oh, there's definitely construction. There were construction trucks, but the house is built, and it's gigantic.
Does it look finished? I mean,
it was not completed. It was not completed. The exterior, whatever they're using, stucco or siding, but the Tritex, Tyvek was all around. There's a separate building, like maybe a guest house on one side, on the north side, and then this house is huge, and it was all framed in. The pressed wood that they use before they put the actual siding or exterior coating. But yeah, I mean it's gigantic, and I'm wondering. Laurel Stewart's here, and she may have seen it since I have. I was up there about a month ago, taking a stroll through there, walk through there, and it's big.
So does anybody know if this property owner proceeded with construction after the declaration of the stage 3?
Does this look like new construction, or has it been
Brand
sitting
new.
there?
Oh, it's all brand new.
So it's like in progress, because sometimes a building can start and then it's put on hold and it's just sitting there.
Well, a neighbor on Catherine Court whom I know, I asked her if there was any progress. She said, this was several months ago, she said they've only built like a little guest house. And then when I was there about a month ago taking a walk in the neighborhood, I was just kind of astounded because the house is built. And it's huge. That's all I can tell you. I can't tell you any more than that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Laurel, do you have any comment on that at all?
No, I don't. I'm not authorized to talk about that.
Okay.
For the NCAC.
Okay.
Well, what I'm getting at here is if
Director Sanders, I may have some help with the answer. It does say that there was a building permit issued on October 20th, 2014, which was after our declaration of the Stage 3 emergency.
Okay,
so if it coincided with that issuance of the permit, that might be a reasonable.
And when was the intent to serve letter suspended?
We suspended those, I think, in 2013 when we originally. Isn't that what is that? Maybe.
I thought it was May of 2014.
May of 2014?
May of 2014, and the building permit was issued in October of 2014?
Yes.
So how in the world did the county issue a building permit when the intent to serve letter was suspended? It's a rhetorical question. I'm not asking anybody.
And this house then that seems under construction at this point does not have a connection to our water, do they? Yeah. So they've been building without water, and they've gone forward with a construction without having the water already there.
To cut to the chase, the picture I'm getting is that the property owner, with full knowledge that the intent to serve letter had been suspended, proceeded with construction, and I would say he proceeded at his peril if he was fully aware that the intent to serve letter was suspended. Am I missing something, or is that accurate?
I believe that I'd feel more comfortable researching this further to answer your questions, because I want to make sure that, for example, and I don't have this in my head, the Lemert settlement agreement doesn't apply to this property. I don't think it does. but I'm not 100% certain without having
It's
a
a
map in
different
front of me.
track, Bob.
It is
A different track.
it's a
an
different
older
track. Okay,
Yeah.
so that doesn't apply. So we'd have to get back to you with more details on that.
Well, I would have zero sympathy for a property owner who proceeded to construct his house with full knowledge that the intent to serve letter had been suspended. But I think we need to get all the facts before we.
It would seem like it, that we really can't do anything with this because obviously we need full picture of what's going on.
Madam President,
Yes.
may I comment too?
Director Barringer?
I'd like to ask a question. I don't know if it's legal counsel, but I'm taking another parcel. This one on good old Edie on Moonstone Beach Drive. It says it was due to the expire July 25th, 2015. The current status is it was expired, but I thought that when we put the suspension in place, you were automatically extended until 6 months after we declare the end was to, so that expired, and just to get our words right, it wouldn't preclude someone for having an active service letter because we need to declare an end to the emergency and have another 6 months. So how do you read the ability of that commercial owner on Moonstone Beach Drive to be able to actually activate that will serve letter?
I believe you're correct. I recall that was the case, that the action that the board took in May of, yes, the action that the board took in May of 2014 included provisions that the suspension included another 6 months after the stage 3 was lifted.
Whichever is later.
Yeah.
So with that said, and because of the information that we need to continue to get on the Evelyn Court issue, I would suggest that we, what do? We pass this, we
Continue it?
Continue it to later this month or even next month. I move that we continue this to the next appropriate board meeting.
Second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have further discussion? Yes, Director Rice? I
Just
have
really
some, too.
quickly, looking at the construction of the sentences for the Evelyn Court one, it looks like that expiration might relate to the building permit
Yes.
from the county and not the intent to serve letter. Okay, so I wasn't, thank you, thought.
Yes. And then just for my own clarification here, we're, at this point, we're not, well, we're talking here about the stage 3 water emergency too. We're not considering lifting or not lifting that. That's not part of it. Okay, just a clarification on that. Is that true, General Manager Gruber? Okay, so then we have a motion. Any further discussion on the motion? And that is to carry this over to an upcoming meeting where we have more facts. Okay, it's been seconded. All right, may we have a roll call, please?
Director Barringer,
Aye.
Director Sanders,
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Thompson,
Aye.
President Robinette.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, let's move then to our next item, which is item B, 9B. And General Manager Gruber, would you please introduce that?
Thank you, Madam President and board members. Item 9B is discussion and consideration of adoption of proposed fund balance cash reserve policy. This is an item that was asked to be brought to the board for consideration by the Budget Committee. It's been discussed for quite some time, formally and informally. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick O'Reilly, our finance manager, and have him just explain the terms and conditions of what we're proposing. And Patrick, thank you.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, and members of the public, we've been looking at this at a cash reserve policy for a little over a year. Talked about it a little bit last year and then deferred it. It was on the agenda last week. Didn't really have much discussion about it, but I'll go over it briefly. We have 3 funds. Whoops. Okay. And there's a separate section in the policy for each fund, the general fund, the water fund, and the wastewater fund. A lot of the reserves are the same. There's a budget stabilization reserve, a liability contingency and emergency disaster reserve, and a working capital reserve in all 3 funds. And then in the water and wastewater funds, we're recommending a rate stabilization reserve, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Basically, what these funds do is they provide capital in case the district needs it. And we're not flush with cash, so we're not really talking about what we're going to put in these funds right now. This is for long-term use. The only fund right now that really has any extra funds at all is the general fund, the water fund, and the wastewater fund are basically pretty close to zero balance in cash. I'm working on the audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 2016. Once I get that complete, then we'll have a better feel for exactly how much cash we have in each fund. But there's not a whole lot in either one of the water or the wastewater fund. It didn't come out good. What the policy recommends is that we have a range of reserve funds that are allowed depending on what's available. For instance, in the general fund, we'd say it would be 10 to 15% for the working capital reserve of the operating budget for the current fiscal year. So if our current fiscal year operating budget is $3.9 million, then the goal amounts for each of these reserve funds is shown here for working capital between $393 and $590. And working capital is really important in the general fund because we're funded mostly with property taxes, and we get those basically twice a year. So between when we get property taxes, we have to have cash available to operate. Budget stabilization reserve and liability emergency reserve are important in the general fund, but not quite as important as in the water and the wastewater funds. So you can see that if you adopt this policy and if the cash becomes available, then as a minimum, we'll have $1.3 million on reserve in the general fund, and as a maximum, a little less than $2 million in the general fund. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, okay. The policy also provides a priority for funding various reserves. The very first priority would be a working capital reserve because we need that to operate day to day. The second priority would be to fund the budget stabilization reserve so that if we have issues where we don't get quite the revenue that we budgeted, or if we have additional expenditures that we didn't budget, we'll have a reserve that's available to help in budgetary issues. The third fund to be funded would be the emergency disaster reserve, and that's so that if we had a fire or something that required extensive expenditures to do repair work, that we would have those funds available. And then the fourth would be a rate stabilization reserve. And actually, the way the rate stabilization reserve works is it's a component of the rates that we charge every month. And so it would really require a Prop 218 election and be included in the standard routine rates that are charged each month. And say we wanted to add $5 a month to the water fund so that in 20 years we could accumulate enough money or in 15 years accumulate enough money to replace the fiscal tank that we're working on now. We'd have those funds set aside and they'd be available, but it would require a Prop 218 election to be able to move forward with rate stabilization reserves. The policy stipulates what each reserve can be used for. It basically requires the approval of the board, except for the working capital reserve. Working capital reserve can be authorized by the general manager just to get us through each year. But all the other funds would require a vote of the board for use. And that basically is my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no request for public comment, so we'll move forward now for board discussion. Questions? Yes. Director Baringer?
I'm assuming that the Budget Committee was the one coming up with this, or was, who was the ad hoc committee comprised of?
Yeah, the Budget Committee considered this at a couple of meetings, and Patrick pretty much gave the same presentation, and then there was some discussion, and then he made some revisions and came back to the Budget Committee. So we've seen it twice, and now we're bringing it back to the board for consideration.
I'm happy with that particular work effort. I do know that Director Rice has been very interested in this section, and I'd be interested in hearing her comments before making any recommendation.
All right, Director Rice?
Thank you, President Robinette, and thank you, Director Beringer. First question that I have for you is are there any differences between our current practices and what this policy is outlining? Anything significant?
No, we just don't have any limits on what our goals are. Right now, we just have cash available, and we require a budget to be approved by the board that expends any funds. This just establishes goals that we'd like to get to. One of the, especially in the water fund and the wastewater fund, you can't accumulate cash just to have it. You have to, legally, you can't do that. You have to have a reason for charging rates. And so this would help substantiate accumulating some cash legally, because we'd say we're accumulating this cash to go into our reserves.
And while you're there, when you were talking about rate stabilization, you think that we would have to do it Prop 218, because that's not really using cash?
That, typically, you would include a rate stabilization amount in your rates each month, and that would require a Prop 218 election.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
We have Director Sanders.
Yeah, Patrick, if the board approves this policy that you've outlined here, how long would it take you to begin implementing it?
At the next board meeting, I could bring back a recommendation for where we are in each fund. Like I said, I don't have firm figures yet, but I could come back and say, I think this is where we are, because I'd have to report to you what the reserves are in each fund, and I could do that at the next meeting.
So then, as a part of your regular finance reports, you would include a balance for each one of these funds, and that would be on a regular basis, right?
I can do that. It's just initially we have to, I'd want everybody to understand these are estimates, they're not audited figures.
Understood.
Yes. And my belief is that in the water and the wastewater fund, we're not going to have much in the way of reserves, and in the general fund, we'll have more than what we showed up there.
Yes, go ahead, Director Rice.
My understanding is that reserves policy is to help us do our jobs with our fiduciary responsibility with the money from the community, whether it's taxes or rates or whatever. My concern is there's not a lot of specifics about what's meant by working capital, like what is going to be included as something that would be okay to spend it on, but not okay to spend it on otherwise, because you shouldn't be paying ongoing costs. And I understand we have gaps between the money coming in, especially because the property taxes only come in twice a year. But there's not a lot of specifics in here, and since it only requires a majority of the board to vote on this, it seems to me that reserves should be more reserved and restricted, or we should be specific about whether they're restricted or unrestricted. All of that is to say that we should probably have like a 4/5 vote if we're going to allow the general manager to dip into those funds for whatever one of these purposes that we have. the other question I had is, we have some money in the LAIF right now, and we've been calling it reserves for years, but technically it's not because we don't really have a policy yet.
Right.
Are these numbers, is this policy cover the money that's already in the LAIF, so a certain amount goes for each thing, or that's all basically general fund?
No, we pool our cash, so all
Right.
the cash goes into the checking account or LAIF.
Right.
Or the money market account, but they're
Right.
all commingled. So the money in LAIF is just part of our pooled cash.
So but would it become like this amount is,
No,
this wouldn't affect the cash we currently have?
It would affect the cash we currently have, but we wouldn't separate it out. We wouldn't have a separate account for the
Oh,
general
no,
fund
I'm speaking
reserves.
of the actual account, I'm talking about the accounting part of it, not the actual dollar bills. But the accounting part of it, the money that's in there, a certain amount of it should be set aside for water, a certain amount for wastewater, a certain amount for general fund, right?
It will be on the books, but it doesn't have anything to do with LAIF or.
Okay, no,
HOA.
that's, and I
Okay.
understand, and we're talking about having it that way on the books.
Right.
I understand that, and
Right.
it essentially puts a little bit further restriction on the use of those funds, and the general manager would still be able to, if it's between property tax time and we need to send out paychecks or something, that he could go
Right.
and use I'm assuming that that's the primary reason why we need to use those extra funds. But it seems to me that if we're going to have reserves, and there's very little detail in here about what specifically counts for that, like payroll would be,
Well,
there's nothing in here that says what those things are.
Yeah, typically the working fund, working capital is used to fund the approved budget. So whatever's in the approved budget, that cash is used to support whatever's in the approved budget. If there's-
So the change, it wouldn't be really a practice change, essentially, from what we're currently doing, at least on that section.
Right.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, in the policy, there's, I'm looking at the very last page where you have listed out the general fund reserve, water fund reserve, and they're all separated out to 10 to 15% of the operating. First question, why are we basing it on the expenditures and not the revenues? Revenues seem like they would be a more stable thing to base it on, because the expenditures can vary so much year to year. It seems to me that you could base it on the revenues and it would be a more stable response.
You could, but it's like buying insurance. You're insuring expenditures. You're not insuring revenue. I mean, you could do it either way.
Because expenditures is also more discretionary in a way than revenues are. Revenues is more, we would have to live within what our revenues actually are coming in. It seems to me that would be a smarter way to do it. The other question I had is, why are we doing 10 to 15% on all three categories rather than 10 to 15% on the total amount for the general fund reserve? We need to have 10 to 15% of our annual expenditures for each one of those things, the working capital, the budget stabilization, and liability and emergency.
We don't need to have anything. It's up to the board to decide what they're comfortable with.
Okay, so right, and I'm trying to figure out which one I'm comfortable with. Why are we
Right.
doing it so that it is, instead of 590, 594 for the general fund period, which would be 15% for the general fund, but we're doing 1,968,647. I mean, I just am asking, that's like triple. I don't know why we're doing it like that. If you're doing percentages on multiple numbers, my bottom line is, I'm not comfortable with this policy yet. I don't think there's enough controls on what will allow the board to make sure that what we're doing with the money that's essentially not extra, but that's for our emergency rainy day funds, whatever we want to informally call it, that we have a way to make sure that what we've got is a sense of what we have and what we're trying to get to and what we want to make sure we don't go over.
Madam President, may I just comment really quickly?
Yes, General Manager Gruber?
I think Director Rice brings up a good point regarding revenues and expenditures. And the reason we proposed it from a revenue perspective at this point in time is historically of all the uncertainties that continue to arise as it relates to the infrastructure. I think we'll get to a point where we'll get caught up, and then that, but it always seems like we are putting out fires. So, but that's a very good question, is from an expenditure standpoint, in many instances, things come up and we need to get it, need to get it taken care of. We just can't wait. Just kind of a holistic comment on this thing, you know, it's supposed to be fluid. You know, there's supposed to be, you want it to have a certain amount of rigid, but you also want it to be somewhat fluid based on the emergencies that we continue to have. It's to help us establish goals as a board and as a district, establish goals. It's to help us in the budget process. This is a tool that will help us in the budget process, establishing and setting that money aside. It's to help us establish short and long-term policies for the board. It's not intended necessarily to be so restrictive that it ties our hands, but it guides us as you move forward in policy decisions. So I just made some notes to myself on that, but those are some just some general thoughts on this. Again, you know, I think what we've seen historically is that, and I want to get out of this mode, is, oh my gosh, we need this, you know, oh my gosh, we need this, oh my gosh, we need this, you know, and but you bring up some really good questions.
Madam President?
Yes.
Might I comment that I think the biggest or the best use of this particular policy is to focus the light on the fact that water and wastewater must be self-sustaining, and it needs more than just, you know, it may need an adjustment in revenue for us to operate this district properly. It also is going to highlight the fact that over the past decade probably we've been raiding that general fund, and I think we've put pretty much of a stop to that if we sell a little bit more water, because we're only at 61%. We based it on 70%, so we need to sell some more water. I think that the work of the committee is excellent. I know that Patrick and the general manager have been working closely with you, and I would recommend that. I know we don't have the details, but we aren't going to get the details unless we implement a first step in this, and I move that we adopt this policy as written and get our first report and see what it looks like.
Okay, that's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that at this time we do adopt this, but then you're suggesting we see some actual figures.
I think that Director Rice will be much more comfortable with it once she sees the first report and sees that there isn't any money really to put in a lot of these things, and we can't continue to raid the general fund. And so what will come to light is that we're going to need to make sure that we start building reserves in those different areas.
And I'll just ask a question.
Okay.
If we go ahead and we do approve this today, then can you bring back to the board and the public an actual application of this, categorical, so that we really see, okay, this is what we have in place, compared to how it was just before if we do approve this today? So you have a comparative look at that this affords a better budget oversight for you and for the public and for the board.
Excuse me. I can do that. I can also, if you're more comfortable looking at revenue instead of expenditures, I can bring side by side saying if this was the revenue, if this was the expenditure, this is the difference.
All right. That's very, yeah. I think there's nothing like, you know, it is a picture's worth 1,000 words at times.
Right. May I make a friendly amendment that we have a statement in here that we review this on an annual basis until we get it into a situation where so that there's actually a built-in, let's review this annually?
I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Sure, and there's really nothing, I mean, it's policy. It's not something that can't be tweaked if if we see that we need more information or need to take it in a different direction. But I think it's important to get something moving.
I entirely
And,
agree, and I appreciate that.
Okay, excellent, excellent discussion. Any further discussion?
Just a question, Madam President.
Yes, sir.
Of legal counsel. For the two enterprise funds, if we're banking money for future capital projects, we have to identify them, don't we? Fee Mitigation Act
I'm not
would
sure
require
if
that?
we, well, I'm not sure if we do. When we're talking about rates, I do recall there's an older case, a pre-Prop 218 case, where the court talked about how rates can properly include such things as reserves for future improvements and things like that. The Fee Mitigation Act that you're referring to relates more to fees that are assessed for specific public improvements under that statutory scheme. And there you do have to identify the improvements, and it's kind of like carving up pie in terms of then assessing the cost of those improvements to the projects, to the properties that will be benefited by it, to assess them in the future when those projects are developed. So those are somewhat different concepts, but that case that I'm mentioning was actually related to the city of Santa Clara and electric rates, and they got a big windfall of some money that came back to them, and a citizen sued and said you have to give it back to the ratepayers, and the court said no, because the city articulated all the different things they were using that money for, including establishing reserves for future improvements and things like that. And I think that's still good law, even though that predated Prop 218.
Where I was going with this is to build on Director Behringer's comment about forcing the district to essentially prioritize things, not only rates and rate stabilization, but in terms of future projects that someday need to be funded. And if my memory serves me right, and I may be wrong, but if my memory does serve me right, I think we have to identify the projects for which we are banking money for future expenditure. I don't believe we're allowed to just keep the money in an enterprise fund and not identify future uses for it.
I'm not certain of
But
that.
at any rate, regardless of that, I think it will force us to set our priorities in terms of infrastructure expenditures in the future and so forth. So for that reason, I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready for the motion? Director Rice?
I just, I appreciate Director Sanders' position on that, and I totally agree with it. And the Little Hoover Commission is looking into special districts. Again, they've just started their inquiries, and so this is a good time for us to be getting a handle on this. Whether or not there's a legal obligation to set certain things aside in the enterprise, certain amount of money aside for projects or whatever, to specifically state it, whether that's a legal obligation or not, I think it's a good policy choice for us to actually be doing it that way so that it is set up that way, because it seems like a smart way to do it to me. Whether it's a legal obligation or not, it seems like smart policy. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay. Then I think let's have a repeat on the motion.
I move that we adopt the policy as presented and having an annual review.
And it was seconded. Okay, so, all right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Behringer?
Aye.
Vice President Thompson?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Sanders?
Aye.
President Robinette?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, we now need to look at future agenda items and any discussion. Does anyone have anything that they're wanting to talk about at this point? Director Sanders?
Madam President, I suggest that we have an item on the next agenda for the next meeting that addresses the issue of the comment period for the environmental impact report, which is now out for review. I think, in my view, it would only be fair to extend the comment period for the period of time between August 31st, when the notice was first posted, and the date the Cambrian comes out this week, because I'm guessing that most people have no clue that it's been
I
available
support
for
that.
circulation.
I support that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be about an 9-day extension.
To add to the September meeting and
Correct.
discuss it then? Okay, and actually, if we're going to actually direct staff to place this matter of business on a future agenda, we do need a motion. Yes.
I second Mr. Sanders' motion to
Yes, that's a
just put
motion.
it on the
Consider it a
agenda.
motion.
Consider it a motion. Then it's seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay. Roll call?
Director Sanders?
Aye.
Director Behringer?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Vice President Thompson? President Robinette?
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Any other items, Director Rice?
I know the times for the meetings have been set for the rest of the year at a meeting that I was not in attendance at, and I will not be able to attend a meeting that starts at 12:30 going forward. I'm trying to work it out so that is the next meeting start at 12:30, or is the next meeting an evening meeting or afternoon meeting?
Madam President, the next one starts at 12:30. The October is an afternoon meeting.
Afternoon.
The November is a 12:30, and then the December
Is
is
it 12:30
12:30. So
too,
we
I
have
believe.
one more evening meeting for the remainder of this
year.
calendar year.
This
Calendar year.
And I regret I was not able to attend that meeting where you had that discussion. I just would like to say that I'm disappointed that we're not having more afternoon meetings. And I don't want to bring back up something that was already decided, but it does mean that I'm not going to be able to attend at least the beginning of those 12:30 meetings.
Okay, thank you. Any General Manager Gruber?
Madam President, when the rate structure, the 218 was approved, there was a caveat in there that allowed for an annual review of a 4% increase. Patrick, when would that need to come to the board in anticipation to solicit community input along with board input? In other words, I don't want to have it come the very month that it's necessary to come to the board and have them make a decision on it. I'd like to give them at least some advance notice on. If you recall, that was built into the Prop 218 notice that there would be an automatic inflationary, not automatic.
No, I was getting
Not
worried.
automatic, but it would be up for board discussion. What I don't want to do is I don't want to bring it to you that month and have you make a decision. I would like to be able to have it maybe as discussion and then go over the budget a little bit more in the financial manager's report and paint a picture of why we may or may not need to do that. So Patrick,
I don't know what month it is. I'll have to find
Okay.
out. Yeah. But
Okay.
I agree with you. We need to do this months in advance.
yeah,
Start
and
looking
we're
at it.
probably almost there already.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it was January, but it's going to be here before we know it, so I'll check, okay? And we'll.
Yeah, let's check on it and know what it is and bring it back next time. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Is there anything else for future agenda? All right. Hearing no other discussion or suggestions, thank you all for attending, and this meeting is adjourned.